Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, November 5th, and today we have a single item work session on our facility investment fees. But before we begin this work session, we will start as we do all things with an invocation and a pledge. The invocation will be led by Pastor Tristan Smith of Myakka City Church of God, and our pledge will be led by Commissioner Mike Ron. Please rise if you're able.
Father, we thank you for this day, for your blessings that you pour out upon us every day. Lord, I thank you, God, for how you've been so good to us in Manatee County. I pray that today, Lord, your blessings would be upon this work session, this agenda. God, I pray, Lord, that you would just bless us as we bless you. And we thank you for all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. You may be seated, and we will get going. Single item, presentation on the water and wastewater rate study and the updated facilities investment fee. Mr. Shea, go ahead.
Good morning. Patrick Shea, Utilities Director. Thank you for allowing us to come before you today, Board of County Commissioners, County Attorney, County Administrator. So give a quick introduction to the Utility Department and kind of our financial considerations, and then I'll turn it over to our rate consultant, Raf Tillis, who will go through both the FIF study update and rate study update. So first and foremost, I think we've all experienced significant inflation since 2018. I use the year 2018 because that's some of the frame of references on some of the projects we've had and some of the investments the county has made in the past several years. So I won't go through each commodity or each level of service related to that inflation, but want to just really pinpoint that the cost to provide clean water to our residents and businesses has far outpaced the rate of CIP that we're seeing in kind of our normal day-to-day. Chemical costs, electrical costs, equipment costs, the cost of labor have all far exceeded the cost of normal inflation. So, you know, anywhere from 30% increase since 2018 to well over 200% inflation rates for commodities. So, as we all know, Manatee County is a growing and very diverse county. We have an active utility department which is made up of drinking water, wastewater, and solid waste. So today's focus is on the drinking water and the wastewater side. The solid waste is a different funding mechanism, different rate study, different utility per se. So our accounts have gone up nearly 25% in that 2018 to 2025 range. The infrastructure has expanded as you all drive around the county and see new growth, see new opportunities. I will also pinpoint that a lot of our capital costs are related to reinvestment, so rehabilitation, replacement of existing utility assets, as well as improvements. So as environmental restrictions and requirements increase, we have to, as a base and as a whole, we have to invest in new treatment technologies to be able to meet that. So as we move forward, always look at our CIP as really three buckets: rehabilitation, improvements, and growth. So financially, to go along with the rate of inflation, we've seen a sharp rise. I think on the cost of clean water slide, I had a lift station that would cost $4 million back in 2018 will cost $6.7 million today for the same project. So comparing to 2015 to 2026, 177 projects in our CIP in 2015, 184 in our 2026 through 2030. So very close, very similar. But the cost per project has gone from $2.2 million per project to $8.8 million per project. So our CIP in just the utilities has gone from just under $400 million for a 5-year CIP to $1.6 billion in CIP costs. So we are, the utility is as you are aware, the utility is in good financial standing, very high bond rating, do very well financially. We meet our requirements. But we are in an area of significant need in the utility to be able to fund and continue to remain in that good standing and not be on the front page of the paper because we're unable to provide the services that we're honored to provide. So potable water, so this is the drinking water side of things. I have a list of projects here, all over $30 million. And again, back to the 2015 number, we had a very few number of projects that were over that $10 million threshold. We have a list right here of projects over $30 million. Really, the key one is the water treatment plant Basin D addition. So that actually meets kind of all three buckets. It's an improvement project, it's an expansion project, and it's also a rehabilitation project, all wrapped up in one. So that will be a project that we will bring before the board later this year, later in 2026 rather, to actually be able to provide some redundancy at the treatment plant and be able to meet future needs as well. So it's about just slightly under $200 million project. Design in 2026, so a contract will be let in 2026, brought for board consideration, and construction slated to start in 2028. Wastewater, so this is the used water, the water going down your drains. We have 3 treatment plants in our system. All 3 of them are due for rehab and rehabilitation and upgrades. So the 3 projects, as you look at the southeast region water reclamation facility, we have that phased out into 3 different projects. And that was done for financial stability to make sure the utility can continue to fund these projects in a timeline, allocate or encumber the money when the project was due to be done. The north region, if you drive up north, it seems it's an amazing growth area where we have a project that we'll bring forward to the board, hopefully in Q1 of this year, so in December, if not January, for design services for that. The Southwest plant is currently under construction. I'll go through these. The north region, we're almost doubling the capacity of that plant from 7.5 to 14 MGD, so 1 million gallons a day, $255 million for that. It's probably the one in most need of the rehabilitation costs, so there's significant reinvestment in the utilities that are there. Southeast, this is the one by the landfill, between the landfill and 44th. This project is currently under construction. Phase A is currently under construction, working on the GMP for Phase B, and then Phase C would be done later on. The Phase C is more related to reclaim, treating to a higher standard, so we're able to use that reclaimed water for irrigation and other purposes. $235 million estimate on that. Southwest, this is serving that region. There's quite a bit of growth over in that area, Seaflower, that area. This is an expansion. This is our largest plant, going from 15 MGD to 18 MGD, currently underway in design, so that contract has been let and approved by the board. Another project just slightly under $200 million. We hope to bring this one also in December for that GMP to move that project forward. The last one, and this is kind of unrelated to a lot of the work that Scott May and our Public Works group does. This is the pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipes. So these are really our large transmission lines for drinking water. We've had some failures. We had a failure here over by the water treatment plant right before I started. So I think in 2023, December 2023, we had a failure of this material. So this is one of those well-intended materials, but they've failed, not just in Manatee County, but across the nation. This, when I started, I had a good conversation with the county engineer and with Evan Pelchowski about this, and I'm like, yep, very familiar. These are failing across the country, whether in the Midwest, the West, or here in Florida. But big numbers, again, everything, 4 projects slated in the CIPL, over $30 million each. So that's kind of a welcome to the utilities and kind of the financial challenges that we have. So directed by the board, we are updating the FIF study and our rate studies to bring forward for consideration. I will stress we're at the phase right now where we're about 95% done with those studies, so the studies aren't done. We want to get board comment and input before we kind of button those up and bring them forward at a later time for consideration and approval or modification at that time. So with that, I will turn it over to Mark from Raftillus, and he'll take us away.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Mark Tuma. I'm a manager at Raftillus, and I'm here today to talk about the background methodology and our key findings, our key preliminary findings for the FIF rate study and the monthly user rate study. As Patrick mentioned, we're about 95% way through completion. We're still waiting on the FY25 actuals to help help us work our way through the final recommendations. So FIFs, or facility investment fees, are designed to recover the cost of infrastructure to serve new growth. These fees were last revised in 2018, and since 2018, the county has made significant capital investment into the water and wastewater infrastructure. And it's also been identified in future years for, as Patrick mentioned, multiple wastewater treatment plant expansions and upgrades due to the significant growth in the county. Facility investment fees, or FIFs, need to adhere to all applicable laws and case law. One of the key elements of the criteria is the dual rational nexus. It needs to meet the dual rational nexus, which means that the fees need to reflect applicable and proportional costs to serve the growth. The figure here illustrates the FIF methodology that we utilized during the study, as well as it meets the dual rational nexus test. So in order to calculate the FIF fee, we first identify all applicable capital investment. So that includes your existing capital infrastructure as well as any near-term capital. The remainder of the fee methodology in terms of the capacity and the level of service is to ensure that we take that applicable cost and allocate it proportionally to our customers. So we do that through level of service. The level of service is equal to the customer demand in terms of per ERC, which is an equivalent residential connection. For our purpose, an ERC is equivalent to a single-family home. So we take our total capital investment divided by the capacity per day at the plant to come up and develop a unit cost. That unit cost is multiplied by that level of service or that customer demand, and then results in an applicable FIF fee. And this ensures that each customer pays their fair share of the cost of the investment.
Quick question for you. This might be obvious, but sometimes it's important to ask. So is it reasonable to assume as you're adding more people, more demand than the cost for delivery of water, for example, is going to go up? Is that a correct assumption to make?
Yeah, so the investment, as you're, when you look at the total capacity of your plant, you divide, that cost can go up. If you need to add, additional ERCs, that cost would go up in proportion, and then you would divide through by the number of applicable ERCs to that capacity. So for each, level for water, it's 250 gallons per day. So for every customer that's added, you need to add capacity of 250 gallons per day.
Got it. Even using the existing infrastructure, not necessarily adding net new. There is an increase in cost per new individual. Okay. Some people say that the cost should be going down, but I think this is pretty clear that the demand causes the cost to go up as well. Okay.
Yes.
Hey, Jordan. Hey, real quick question on the level of service. And the gallons per ERC, are we not including commercial users in that level of service?
So, yeah, so for one ERC is equal to a single-family home. So for a commercial customer that may have like a 2-inch meter, that's equivalent to 8 ERCs. So they're going to pay 8 times what a single-family home would pay because they have the demand higher than a single-family home.
All right, so you just group everybody into that ERC calculation.
So yeah, the
for that level of
ERC
service.
Yeah, so the ERC is based on the meter size, and then from there they pay their proportional share based on how many ever ERCs is equivalent to their meter.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Just to reiterate, our cost basis for the calculation, for the applicable costs, we include and exclude certain assets from the calculation. For inclusions, we include, supply, treatment, backbone transmission for existing and near-term capital investment. We exclude things such as local distribution systems, equipment, vehicles, and any grant-funded projects as they're not eligible to be calculated in the fee. And again, just to reiterate, the level of service for proportional cost for this study, based on the county adopted level of service, it's 250 gallons per day per ERC, which is, a single family home, and then 185 gallons per day for wastewater customers. So here we have an excerpt from our draft FIF report, and what this shows here is which assets are being included and excluded. As you can see, we're excluding somewhere between 30 to 45% of the total assets in service currently. So these are all in service assets at original cost. We also include near-term capital. So for here, we're including the near-term CIP through 2030. We're also, again, removing those excluded type assets such as distribution and collection type projects, and then also reducing the total assets for retirements, which accounts for assets in our CIP that are going to replace existing assets in our system. So based on the methodology that I just presented, we're coming up with a calculated fee of $10,861 based on discussion with the county staff and county attorney, and for the Florida Impact Fee Act, the increase is capped at a 50% adjustment, which can be seen there at $7,369. That's the 4-year, that $7,369 is the amount that would be paid over a 4-year period for the phase-in. That can be seen down below, where we increase the fee by $614 per year over the 4-year period. To provide some additional context, we did a benchmarking comparison of local municipalities and communities around the region. As you can see, the average for the survey is around $5,133. Currently, the Manatee County FIFs total about $4,913. By the 4th year, which would be in 2030, under the capped 50% increase, we would be at about $7,300 or so, $7,400, which is still very comparable to the other municipalities listed on this comparison. One thing I'd like to point out is that a number of these utilities also have not experienced the type of growth or have revised their fees in recent years. So that is another reason why you see Clearwater and Pinellas County, they have not experienced the type of growth that the county has and hadn't had the need to revise their fees.
What counties did you, so they're, I see Pinellas.
So yeah, there's Lee County, Collier County, and Sarasota County all the way to the right.
Okay, I guess the question I had is, what was the methodology for comparison? So I noticed these are counties that are in proximity to us. What about, let's say, larger counties in the East Coast, for example?
Yeah, so we did this is more like a regional comparison.
Okay.
We can do a statewide comparison if you all would like to see that in terms of 15 other counties, the similar size to Manatee County. But I do have the next slide, which also points out a few other counties and cities across. This is a statewide comparison. This comparison actually shows for cities and counties that have recently adopted and adjusted their impact fees or FIFs. And you can kind of see there, the lowest one on that list is Lee County. at $5,700 for combined. But I want to point out that that is their first year of their phase-in. By the fourth year, they're going to be over $7,500 for their total FIF. So everyone on this list is a minimum of $7,000 to $8,000 in total, water and wastewater impact fees.
This last question on the comparison. So when you looked at these cities and counties, did you account for whether their system was as complex as ours? So for example, some counties might have a greater predominance of septic systems, for example, or they may not have as many water treatment facilities, I guess assets, I'll just leave it at that. So was there a comparison against that?
So the basis for this study was that these ones had recently adopted and also had similar type capital plans. So they were all doing expansion type projects for their capital. So it was more in line with what the county was kind of moving towards in the near term.
I have a quick question along those lines. It's probably easier to see on the last slide, just because it's cleaner.
Sure.
You look at some of these, like Sarasota, way at the far right. We're a self-contained system at this point in time. While we're a member of Peace River Water Authority, we don't buy water from them. Sarasota County, for instance, buys virtually all their water from them. What they don't buy from them, they buy from us. And that's the same thing with places like City of Northport and some others. They're buying from water authorities. A lot of these places, Tampa, all them, they're buying from water authorities. So obviously, there's facility investments associated with the treatment plants that are off-site. In their case, say Sarasota, they just had to bond $350 million to build part of a hole for capacity out at Peace River. That bonding isn't necessarily coming out of these facility investment fees they're charging. I mean, they're coming out of water rates and other things. That's why their water is so much more expensive than ours. Is there an apples-to-apples comparison there? Because, I mean, yes, our facility investment fees are, proposed to be $7,400, which is still lower, but we're in theory doing more with those facility investment fees because we're building everything soup to nuts here because we're providing our own water, we're treating our own water, we're collecting our own water, we're containing our own water, whereas other places aren't. Is there an apples-to-apples comparison to show, hey, this is what we're collecting for the similar amount of service? I just think it's hard to compare. Otherwise, we would just go buy water from Peace River, and then everyone's water rates would double here. But in theory, it could save us some future facility expansion. I mean, Pat was telling us about new reservoirs for ourselves for retention of water, which we wouldn't need if we were just buying from Peace River. However, your water bill would double. So is there a comparison, or is this just a straight, did you look at what was being provided, what they were utilizing facility investment fees for versus what else were we providing that maybe Sarasota isn't?
Yeah, so, this is just a straight comparison of what they're charging for their fees. So we didn't go into what they're utilizing their fees for.
Similar theme, assets. So one of the things that, we'll leave the slides alone. So one thing I'm curious about are the special districts. So can you tell me a little bit about what's, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, but the liability for a lot of the water, sewer, perhaps some reclaimed lines. Can you clarify whether that counts as an asset for the county? Is that what the CDD or stewardship district owns, maintains? I noticed in the assets we talked about transmission lines. I don't know if I saw in there where the lines, the smaller lines are.
So Commissioner Sadiq, generally we'll bring forward agreements with those CDDs to turn over those utilities. So when they're first constructed, that capital is paid for by those developments generally, and then when the turnover comes, there's some credit in the O&M costs, but generally the utility or the county does not reimburse for the cost of that construction.
Right.
So they if they build it to the county standards, it's in the county's standard conditions. When it's turned over, then it becomes an asset. So that's kind of excluded from the discussions on this, but it's all factored in overall. It goes into kind of a credit system, and County Engineer Scott May is here, and he could really expand on it if that would be helpful. It is factored in, and they're paying it, but it doesn't become an asset until the board does approve the turnover agreement.
Okay, that was the question I was gonna ask, is what, as I understand, there are some CDDs which can expire, and so I worry about the turnover and whether we're accounting for that. Granted, this is just looking till 2030, but by the time they get turned over to us, perhaps they're not in the best of shape, for example. I don't know.
Yeah, if when we bring the next turnover agreement, we can kind of spell out the investment that they have to make to bring it back up to county standard at that time. So we try to make sure we protect the utility, protect the ratepayers when those assets are turned over, understanding that the CDD or the HOA had to operate and maintain that lift station for years. Their rate was the same as a rate that didn't have to do that. So there's a checks and balances, kind of a trading effect that goes into effect to really make that calculation.
All right, and we didn't have Zoom up, so I couldn't see, but Commissioners McCann, Feltz, and Bearden are all on via Zoom, and Commissioner Bearden, your hand is raised, so you are up, sir.
Thank you very much. Just had a few questions. How does the county verify that the dual rational nexus test is met for both the water and wastewater systems? Particularly ensuring that the fees are collected and are used only for the capacity expansions directly benefiting the new growth.
Commissioner Bearden, so
Yep.
it's a team effort, and Reptilis and the report will really spell that out, and that's why that $1.6 billion CIP went down to about 1.2, because we need to take out, legally, we need to take out the things that aren't FIF eligible. So the FIF fee for development and the FIF fee for utilities is very similar. It's a separate account, can only be used for the purposes as laid out in state statute. All those same conditions exist. So the accounting is all very well tracked. I think the meeting before last, the FIF administrator gave the report along with the CFO on how those fees were spent the previous year. So there's a lot of checks and balances in there. I would say the whole process to develop what the FIF fee rates are we look very, very closely to make sure that nothing gets put in to that consideration that isn't actually legally attributable to an FIF fee. So it's strictly using FIF fees to help fund growth projects.
Okay.
That-
So given that the 30 to 45% of the total assets are excluded from the actual calculations, what safeguards exist to ensure that the excluded assets aren't inadvertently subsidized by the FIF revenue?
So Commissioner Beard, when the projects are brought forward to the board for consideration and approval, the financing strategy is laid before that. So, so for example, say like the treatment plant, we will go through that project as it's designed, and we'll allocate what portion of that project. And generally, what we're seeing here with the phased-in approach, it's hard to recoup the perfect FIF amount. If we collect more than is necessary, then there's a turn back in the administrative code that we would have to turn that, essentially refund that money. So we're very cautious in, I would say we're very conservative in what the FIFE rate is. We don't collect we don't collect an exact amount, but we generally collect, historically, I think municipalities in Florida collect less FIF fees than actually they end up needing in the long run.
Okay, and then how often is that ERC demand assumption, assuming that we get 250 gallons a day for water and 185 gallons for wastewater validated against the actual metered usage data? And how might shifts in conservation behavior affect that proportionally?
Commissioner Beard, and those numbers are calculated with our DEP permit for the individual plants. So our plants are run through permits from the Department of Environmental Protection. We have an allocation or a capacity limit. So we have to submit those every 5 years for that consideration. We really want to make sure, as we're trying to be as thoughtful and deliberate and not underbuild, but not overbuild as well. Like the ERC for wastewater is decreased in this rate study or this IF study compared to last time, just because real use. So it's a number that, pretty much every 3.5 years or so, we're starting to crank the numbers out as we go to DEP to renew our permits with those agencies.
Okay, and so is that methodology sensitive to the nonlinear cost behaviors, such as the economies or diseconomies of the scale that arise when nearing system capacity limits?
Commissioner Bearden, can you rephrase that?
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm
is the
able to
methodology
answer.
sensitive to the nonlinear cost behaviors, such as the economies or diseconomies of scale that arise when nearing system capacity limits? So as we begin to push out, right, when do we know when we're at the certain specific point where we're nearing the system capacity limits? And at what point do we need to take action on that
So on
as we
the,
begin to grow out east?
so on the capacity side, yeah, I think it's an important point to stress that you don't expand your treatment plants in small increments. So you build for a 20-year increment. So these projects in the next 5 years are really between 10 and 20-year investments. So we're not going to spend $250 million on the North Regional Water Reclamation Facility and then have to spend another $250 million at that same plant in 5 years. So, the cost methodology of the FIF rates are updated by board direction or every 5 years, just to make sure those numbers look right and kind of fit the current conditions. So, the further you get out from today, the more opportunity there are to kind of reevaluate and look, sharpen the pencil as you get down 4 or 5 years from now.
Okay, well, okay. So as we expand, I'm just having a little bit of, I'm going to be honest with you, a little bit of heartburn about this, because knowing from past decisions that we've made, especially regarding impact fees, right? We just had a discussion yesterday about Lorraine Road and funding that road, right? And now we don't even have the money to fund that road. But yet we've got a bunch of brand new development around there, right? And it just tells me that obviously we're not collecting the full amount of the impact fees to pay for the necessary infrastructure that we have in place, right? So my point is that I want to make sure that if we're doing this, like, what controls do we have in place to track the FIF revenues by project and ensure full transparency and how those dollars are allocated to the eligible capital improvements? Have we thought about that?
Commissioner Bearden, if I understand your question, yes, and we do that, and we're required to do that every year, and that's the FIF administrator comes forward and kind of does the annual report for the board annually, hence it's an annual report. But I think if there's specifics, or if a briefing or a particular work session would be helpful to kind of go through how FIFs are used in utility projects, we can certainly do that if that's requested.
Okay, so given that the calculated fee is $10,861, but was reduced to, let's just say, $7,369 due to statutory caps. How is the county addressing the potential funding gap that this creates in long-term CIP plan?
So Commissioner Bearden, so these are enterprise funds, water, wastewater funds. So these are either recouped through grants, FIF fees, or user rates, so water utility bills.
Okay. And if the cost escalation, let's just say, continues, as we have seen in the CIP analysis, what contingency strategies exist to prevent deferred infrastructure investments caused by a capped or phased fees?
If we were in that condition, or if that situation were to arise, then we would come before the board to ask for consideration and direction on which way to go with rates or other measures that might be possible.
Okay. Have we conducted a long-term sensitivity analysis to model what happens if growth slows or if development patterns shift?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so are we planning on doing that type of analysis? I mean, this is a huge deal. I mean, this is not just, hey, we're going to slap on FIF fees and yeah, that's it, and you know, just kind of go with the flow like we have been doing in this county for the last 20 years. I want to make sure that some type of long-term sensitivity analysis is conducted, because we don't know what's going to happen if growth slows or if development patterns shift, right? I think that would be an important aspect to add to this analysis. So what mechanisms do we have essentially to refund or reallocate unused FIF revenues if growth projections don't materialize as expected within the statutory time limits?
Yeah, so if that were the case, there is a way to utilize the FIF revenue for expansion-related debt that was issued in prior periods. So you could utilize that to help pay the debt service for the expansion piece of those projects that was taken out from debt.
Okay. So you guys compared us essentially to some of the regional comparables, right?
Yes.
Am I right on that?
Yes.
Can you go back to that and just
Sure.
how do they align in terms of utility scale, the customer base, and infrastructure age of those particular developments? Because I know that, you know, we're one of the only counties that really is growing. I mean, more than Sarasota County. So it's going to be a little bit different in comparables. So can you give me an explanation for that, please?
Yeah, so when we do this comparison, we don't look at the infrastructure age or the, you know, overall population growth within those utility areas. We can take a look at that to see how that would compare to you all. I can tell you, you know, for Sarasota and Collier, they may not be growing as quickly as you all, but they are growing, and they do have a lot of growth, and they've recently, both of them have adopted their new fees over time because of that need for growth and that need for expansion. You know, Sarasota County is doing a lot of expansion to their wastewater side. They're starting to do it to their water side through Peace River. So there is a lot of expansion related that I think makes it comparable, and that's why you see that those two are to the far right on the comparison.
Okay. And so how do we ensure that the fee equity between the residential and commercial sectors, particularly in the mixed use developments where consumption patterns differ from traditional ERC assumptions, like how do we ensure that fee equity
Yeah, so that's
in between
through.
all?
Yep, I understand. So that is through the level of service that is indicated through either the meter size, or when they're going for their permitting, they would have to state, you know, what, you know, how many ERCs are going to be, and then they're charged, you know, our rate is a per ERC rate. So for the commercial, if it's, 8 ERCs or 5 ERCs, if it's a 1.5 inch meter, whatever it may be, those would be, applied proportionally, so that way everyone's paying their fair share.
Okay, and so then how do these fees interact with affordable housing objectives? Are there exemptions, credits, or phased-in options for lower cost developments?
So Commissioner Bearden, so to simplify what Mark just mentioned, so it's a relatively easy process to develop what your ERC rate will be. So look at the residential as kind of the base, and then everything's expanded from there. So it's all based on meter size. So that meter really dictates how much flow, how much water can enter that property and then exit that property through the sewer system. So so if you're a large multifamily unit and you have a 6-inch meter, there's a calculation. You take the FIF fee for the residential, you multiply it by that factor, and you get what your ERC value is. So it does a couple things. It helps the water conservation side of things, because when a property owner or developer is building a property, they like to make sure that the size meter they need really meets their needs. On the affordable housing, we're somewhat agnostic as the utility, so we follow board policy and board direction on if there is credits or if there's any sort of program that relates to affordable housing. We bring the rates forward, and then it's at the board's discretion if they want to deviate from that rate schedule.
Now, are we looking to, regarding the comprehensive plan, I mean, is this going to be, are we looking to develop this concurrent with the actual infrastructure so that we can ensure that it keeps pace with the permanent growth? Is that how we're doing this? Because we're doing everything backwards when it comes to impact fees. I mean, that stuff's definitely not when it comes to infrastructure and our roads. Are these going to be built out concurrently, or, I mean, how does that, what are we looking at when it comes to this and these new pipes that we're going to have to put in essentially?
And to look at this, there's two different components to it. There's your pipe component, and then there's also your plant component. As far as the plant goes, you take the capacity, and as it's actually being utilized is when you look at upgrading the plants. You don't upgrade the plants just because you permitted on paper the number of units that are there, because otherwise you end up with additional operations and maintenance costs. So you try to plan accordingly and have your next upgrade on your plant come online when you're nearing that capacity. As far as the lines go, there's a master plan that's adopted every 5 years, as Pat alluded to. And with there, we look at the growth patterns, we look at the flow patterns of what's currently going on, and the rate or the volume of what that is goes up or down based upon that. A few years ago, we were running at, based on each plant, 330 in the Southwest and 240 in the Lakewood Ranch area. Well, when we started looking at those in detail, some of those that came out are we were having inflow and infiltration issues in the Southwest. So as new growth comes on, we're not charging that rate of what you're seeing on the average home. We're actually looking at what is the actual value of what they're doing, because your inflow and infiltration doesn't grow with your new pipe systems.
Got it.
Does that answer everything?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm looking at this though. We're saying that we're going to be building this out for the next 20 years. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
Okay, so how are these just paid for the affected development, or are these fees going to be paid out to the whole county? The whole county's going to have to pay this fee.
These fees are for essentially new accounts, so
Okay.
new builds.
So if the mitigation plans, what are the risk mitigation plans if, let's say, projected growth slows down and then capital costs continue to rise? We're going to have to continue to increase those fees, I would assume, right?
Yes, if the rate study and the FIF study, when they're completed, if it is not meeting kind of the financial need of the county, in the future, we would bring it back to the board for consideration to make
Okay.
alterations.
Yeah, I'm asking these questions because this is a very complex situation based on Manatee County. That's why I'm asking these questions. And it's questions that we need to ask because we need to know exactly what's going on. If we are considering adding an extra fee, I mean, we're going to be feed out of this county. I'll be honest with you. Everybody's going to be feed out of this county eventually.
Just a point of clarification, the current fee is for $4,913 for a residential unit. So this is a fee that's currently in place that was last updated on a 2018 study.
So let me ask you this then. Are these fees going to be charged on everybody that's east of the FDAB? Or are they going to be charged everybody, with some that are west of the FDAB? That's a very good question to ask. I don't know why people are kind of looking up in the air. I mean,
Currently,
it's a very reasonable question to ask. Are they going to be charged east of the FDAB? And are they going to be charged, some of those fees going to be charged west of the FDAB?
the current FIF fees are for everything inside the FDAB. Anything that was approved outside of the FDAB would be under this same rate, such as Taylor Ranch, and I think it was East River Ranch. Any of the others would be at the board, and at that point, there's the option of you could look at, is there a different fee that's necessary for something outside of the FDAB? But that would be all at the direction of the board.
Okay. Okay, that's all the questions I have.
We did a
you.
master plan to look at what it would take to do that, but we didn't do an actual study. I think it was just a preliminary rough estimate of what we think the fees might be for the additional costs because of the lines would need to be larger, especially for your water lines.
But why? I thought we did. Like, I proposed, when Evan was here, we tried to do a full county FIF study. I think at least 3 times I made a motion and couldn't get a second to do it because nobody wanted to see the numbers that would spit out the other end.
Right.
Finally, we had a work session that was supposed to be about FIFs, and kind of the roundabout way that it was manipulated was, we'll just do one for east of the FDAB, because part of 2128 is that they have to provide their own utility system, or at least the pipes and the infrastructure associated with it. We want to make sure that we were charging the proper amount to make sure that the credits work properly. I thought my understanding, and I guess I was wrong, was that we did do a study just for east of the FDAB, and then there was the contemplation, hence this work session, to expand that to a countywide study.
Right. I believe that that was just a quick study. It wasn't done as a full in-depth like it's being done here. So it was a shortened time frame. They didn't look at all of the potential costs that come up there. When you look at it, you're kind of taking what a generality is, and you haven't looked at what all of the pipe sizes are, what your pressures are. You haven't put it into the full model to look at everything.
But why?
So-
That I don't believe, and I may just be wrong, but I don't recall that being the conversation of, we authorize staff to half-ass a report. I thought it was, we have an issue because we're going to be running into water capacity issues. We're running into pipe issues. There was a whole big discussion because I think some of this came up because East River was trying to work with Taylor Ranch, and Taylor Ranch is like, I only need 6 inches, and East River is like, well, I'm building 1 million homes, so I need like an 8-foot pipe over here. And there was a discussion, who's paying for what, and what's their responsibility versus our responsibility. I thought that's what triggered the, if I can't get the whole county FIF study, then let's at least do an East County one, because they're going to start building, they have started building on Taylor Ranch portion, and they're gonna start coming to us like everyone does and asking for credits. And then we're going to have to credit them dollar for dollar on their real expenses, and we're collecting a fraction of the real expenses, because we're collecting 1,000 when it should be 10, or whatever this number works out. And we're gonna tell them, yes, you only need 8 inches for the 2,000 homes you're building, but then we need this piece over here for East River, and then everyone's gonna run over to Medallion and say, hey, you gotta chip in over here. And then there's gonna be an argument, maybe we'll just run 2 separate pipes because I'm not chipping in with these guys. I thought that's why we did the study. Now you're telling me instead of ordering an appraisal, we order a broker's opinion of value is effectively what you're saying.
We did a study looking at the pipes themselves. We didn't look at the plant, because the comparison was, what is the cost for them to supply it to us? We still have treatment costs and other things by the age of it.
I agree with you, and that was the precipice for this, because there was a discussion, I recall this vividly, I've been here longer than I should. We had this conversation because there was a whole big discussion as part of the piece, every year we submit, as Commissioner Beard knows, he's been on that board representing us for 2 years. We submit a report to Peace River effectively saying, here's how much capacity we have left. Here's roughly, and at one point it was 2037 when I got here, and it kind of trended more towards 2035. And that's kind of the precipice. So we need to come up with more capacity or we're going to be stuck with Peace River. But then it came out during one of those presentations that we would calculate that effectively based on potential anticipated development growth west of the FDAB, because that study has always assumed we're only building west of the FDAB. And then all of a sudden, we had 7,500 homes approved, plus Lazy C, plus Cone Ranch. So now you're looking at 9,000 or so homes east of the FDAB and 1.5 million square feet of commercial for East River, all of which also need water. And then it was like, hey, you know that 2035 we said? That doesn't even factor that in, because this model doesn't even contemplate that. That's what started that whole, we need at least to do the FIF east of the FDAB, because it's not just providing the pipes. They need to make sure they're paying for their share of any additional capacity, because we didn't anticipate their capacity until 2128 existed. So I thought we were running for that. I mean, I had no impression in my mind that we weren't structuring that, because they're going to come to us and get credits for the pipes, and we're going to give it to them, which is going to end up inevitably, because it always is, more than the cost of the facility investment fees they're going to pay us. So that's how all these stupid impact fee credits work, is they were going to pay like 5 million in impact fees or facility investment fees, and we're going to hand them back 10 million to put pipes in that we'd rather have, and we're going to stroke them a check and get no facility investment fees to go towards capacity. Now we have to start digging additional holes over here to come up with more water to fund the 9,000 homes and 1.5 million square feet of commercial that's chipping in nothing. And we're on the hook, and every taxpayer and homeowner and business owner in this community is going to get ever-increasing water rates, admittedly still significantly cheaper than anybody around us, but still, dollar is a dollar, and it's cheaper for a reason, because we put in the investment for the infrastructure. So what are we going to do about that? I mean, what are we going to do about the fact that we're going to have thousands of homes coming in that are not going to be paying their fair share on the pipes alone, which is what the West. If you build west of the FDAB, and I'm sorry for dragging this on, but I just want to make sure I get my point across, and then I'll hear your answer. If you build west of the FDAB, we have some commitment to providing you capacity. That's a commitment we make to people. That's why we have a development boundary. So I can't really tell them, hey, you're building a new subdivision out west, therefore you have to chip in, because that comes out of your water rates, that comes out of your existing facility investment fees.
Right.
I have no commitment. I do not owe a sprinkler head to somebody east of the FDAB. The agreement for 2128 was they were going to provide 100% of the cost to provide all their utilities and all their infrastructure. But now every time a conversation comes up, not to lead into tomorrow, but we somehow find a way of chipping in to build their infrastructure and provide for their water capacity on other people's dime. And that was never the agreement east of the FDAB. I truly thought that we were finalized. I thought, honestly, this was part of today's work session, because there's nothing attached to this work session. There's a one-page cover letter. Maybe it stretched to 2. I had no idea what we were talking about here today. And I honestly thought this was going to be the culmination of a study, not the discussion of potentially doing a study countywide and being told we did no study east of the FDAB, because these facility investment fees get paid when they pull the permits, correct?
Correct.
So this isn't like we wait for CO like impact fees. This is money we should be collecting today on homes literally coming out of the ground today, and we're not collecting those fees. We're collecting pennies on the dollar that isn't even going to provide the adequate credit for the pipes. And now we're on the hook for 100% of the capacity increase, which looks like it's going to cost us $1.6 billion.
Right. And that's part of where I was trying to explain, and I probably didn't do a great job, is when we took the existing value of what the plant upgrades are. The plant upgrades are the same inside the FDAB as they are outside the FDAB.
They're not, though. I'm sorry, I fundamentally disagree with that. If you're inside the FDAB, then we have a promise to you to provide some of that capacity, and so there's some onus on us and the water rates to provide capacity because you're building where you're supposed to build. There was never that promise on the other side of the FDAB line, so they should be incurring 100% of the cost for that capacity.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
I'm not saying you're disagreeing, I'm just, well, you are, I am saying you're disagreeing. But I'm just saying, so the rates should be different because their responsibility east of the FDAB is fundamentally financially different than somebody building on the other side of that line.
Right, but when we were building these plants, the cost to build the plant is the same on either side. Now, whether you were supporting, let's say a percentage of it's being paid for people west of the FDAB versus east of the FDAB, the cost to build the plant is the same either way. So as this new study is done, we can apply what the new values for the plant cost upgrades are to the area outside, and that gives you the whole picture. You were taking data that was there and looking at the current plant that was done before they restudied the FIF. And you were looking at the lines that needed to go out there, but you weren't looking at what the plant upgrades were because we knew this was coming with it.
You said the plant costs are higher, but the thing that I've had this conversation with Patrick too is the topography is very different out east. The elevation increases, the soil content, all of that factors into how much you have to spend to put in the same type of infrastructure, transmission lines, water lines. I don't know about clarifiers and plants, it's different, but I don't think there's an issue there. But
Right.
there's a lot of infrastructure that it is inherently more expensive because the topography is different out there. It's more expensive to put
Correct.
those things in.
And that's part of the piping. If you're having to put a reservoir out there or a water
Yeah.
tower to build your pressure up, that's part of the piping costs that were the calculated value in there. But the actual treatment at the plant, whether you're treating at the well field or the Lake Manatee where it's coming in, it gets pulled into the well field and it's brought and treated there. It's treated all at the same location. The upgrade to do that treatment is where those costs are the same, but when we're talking about the pipes, we looked at booster pumps, all of those things of what it would take to provide the pressures out there, but not the treatment itself. And that's the part I'm saying we didn't do the study for.
Okay, real quick, I'm going to let you keep talking. I just want to, for clarification purpose, I'm going to need everyone on the board to start putting their name on because I do have a lot of people on Zoom putting their hands up, and I don't like the interruptions coming from speakers. So, Commissioner Bearden, I'm not sure if your hand is still raised or is raised new, and Commissioner Feltz. I
Yeah, no,
acknowledge-
it's still raised.
Okay.
So
So
whenever you're
after-
ready for me to
after
have that
Commissioner Sid-
conversation.
Okay, after Commissioner Sadiq is done, I'm calling
Got
on
it.
Commissioner Feltz and
Okay.
then Commissioner Bearden. Anyone on the dais who wants to speak, just put your name on. You can continue, Tel.
Yeah, I 100% agree in principle that the cost, I would even break it down within west of FDAB at some point in the future, but I don't want it to be too complicated for this particular conversation, because I do think there are inherently different costs for a resident, drawing on resources from utilities based upon where you live. I think you brought up booster pumps. That's another cost differential between east of the FDAB. I would even say parts of East County, maybe Northeast County and West County, for example. I think you need to have those out there in order to be able to have the appropriate water pressure to move it along. I think the disappointment I have is we're not having that. I also made the same assumption as the chairman. I thought we were going to have more information about East. I think I want to see that as soon as possible. I don't want to wait 2 years for it. I don't think it should be that expensive or it shouldn't take that long to figure it out. It's not like we have all these water lines, sewer lines, and too many more developments coming there. I want to see that as soon as possible. And then I think some way to calculate and factor in the overall cost. I know you're talking about water treatment, but there are other ancillary costs to ensure that the infrastructures are, again, the wastewater, the sewer, the water lines, and talking booster pumps. We've got lift stations on my end of the county, all of our ends really. So I just want to see a bit more of a breakdown in terms of the fee east and west of the FDAB, but in the future also, as we're trying to encourage more infill redevelopment, especially in the urban core of our district, I like to see some delineation between what the cost for someone might be in places where the infrastructure is there already and there likely will not be improvements because the capacity in theory is there, compared to a place where the capacity will be expanded or is being expanded in the future. Does that make sense?
Yes, Commissioner Sadiq, I'll take a step back on the east of the FDAB. We can work with Raptilus and look back on what has been done and kind of recreate that, and bring that forward, and I think in relatively short order. On the cost of service, my house, I use 2 lift stations to convey my used water from my house to the southeast plant. So if you live across the street from the southwest plant, you might use 1 lift station, and that lift station might have cost $500,000, and the lift stations I'm using might be $10 million. So it is not typical. I'm not aware of any utility that really breaks out kind of that granular level of how much their water and sewer costs based on proximity. But the FIF discussion does allow some of that because, as County Engineer Scott May was alluding to, that lift station would be FIF, a new lift station would be FIF eligible, a new booster station, a new water tower, all of that would be eligible for FIF. So it could be captured in kind of the FIF methodology and brought forward with something like that. So if I think if that's where you're going, I think that's something that we could have a kind of an overview and look at what kind of level of work that would take to really kind of parse that out.
Okay. No, nothing, not to that level of granularity. I was more just thinking, what's your home water treatment plant, for example? Like, does it make sense? And I'm not saying this necessarily is the best approach, but I'm just curious to see if there's any difference in terms of cost between someone that's being serviced by the Southwest Water Treatment Facility compared to North. We might add more capacity to both, but
Okay.
But if there's not, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I was just curious. But I do agree, east and west of the FDAB, we definitely need more information there.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
Commissioner Phelps.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, very good. First off, I want to thank Commissioner Cruz, Commissioner Sadiq, and Commissioner Bearden for very eloquently explaining some of the issues that are directly affecting my district. Again, this is why we were very hesitant and very militantly protesting the movement of the FDAB because of the cost of the issues that we were having with growth at this time. Just to let you know from the ground floor of the issues that we are already having, I have been told that we are maxed out on our reclaimed water. That one of the reasons that we have been in opposition to the movement of the FDAB or to the 2.1.2.8 amendment is the cost of expanding our county services. This is also an issue where we know that the city of Bradenton is dealing with what is affecting our water supply for everyone. So I think you've very eloquently stated the same much better, thank you, than I could have. And I appreciate that from our other commissioners to understand how this is the greatest challenge for District 1. You've done a very good job of explaining things that I probably could not as eloquently, and I appreciate your concerns. I think this is definitely a situation where we need an expedient study that addresses where we are at right now, as we knew that that this was going to happen when we moved the FDAB and put in the 2.1.2.8 amendment. We haven't resolved the problems that we are already having with our water and the availability and the proposed homes that are already being have already been approved out here. So I would definitely think that the course of action would be to attend to those issues first, and two, keep this in mind when we go into our land use meeting tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bearden.
Thank you. Obviously, these are important questions, right? And so, because it's just not a fee. Also, if anybody wants to do anything, they got to know what the cost of all this stuff is. You know, if they're selling a house, if they're building commercial. I mean, that's why this is so important to know, because it affects the economy as well. So it's just not a fee. It's a trickling effect that, begins to roll. So that's all I have. I appreciate you guys giving us a good presentation today. Thank you.
All right, I have nobody else on the board. Is there more to the presentation? Okay, go ahead. Well, I assume there was,
Yeah.
but, I mean, sometimes in a work session, it's easier to ask questions as you go, as best we
Yeah,
can.
no worries. So that's it for the FIF section of our presentation. So now we're going to move on to the monthly user rates study that we're completing.
Oh, so you were done, at least with that section.
With that section, correct,
Okay.
yes.
So, real quick.
Yep.
So because now you're going into something completely different.
Yes.
I mean, it both affects water, but I mean, technically, it's a wholly different thing. So some people, I believe, may have been holding off for the end of the presentation. So
Okay.
before I jump the gun, if there's anyone who wanted to talk about the facility investment fee portion of this work session, this is effectively a two-item thing, even though it's listed as one. Commissioner Siddiq, you're on the board? Yes. And Commissioner Ballard, now you're on the board. Okay.
So I was looking through our CIP, and this is just a general conversation, this is probably more for Pat, conversation about what we're gonna spend this money on in the future. When I look at our utility CIP, I see capacity improvements, expansions, some repairs, lift stations, that type of thing. What I don't see the money going towards are things that can address the quality of drinking water, preparing us for emerging challenges. PFAS is one of them. The forever chemicals, well-studied, links to cancer, affecting kids, that type of thing. So there are very few utilities, and we've had this conversation one-off, Pat, but there are few utilities that are factoring that in. I think I saw like Pinellas, Hillsborough, Miami-Dade, Pasco to some extent is looking at it. And I know the federal regulations have changed, so we don't have a gun to our head as far as the timeline goes of 27, but what I don't know is the cost. And that's one of the things that concerns me, because on top of having aging lines west of the FDAB, we also have significant concerns over what's in the water that we're putting into our bodies. And so I don't know what the cost of PFAS treatment looks like. Do we have any general estimates? Granted, you have nothing in the CIP, so kind of shooting a little bit in the dark, but I'm just curious what the impact of that is as well, on future CIP, the cost, and potentially how the rate fee can contribute in the future to addressing some of those needs.
So Commissioner Siddiq, thank you for that question. I come to you from Minnesota, home of 3M, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. The class action lawsuit by utilities ended up in a $10 billion settlement with 3M. The county is slated to receive some of those funds for that settlement as a payment. So working to kind of wrap that up. There's a couple other companies that were also in class action lawsuits. So there should be some, but far below kind of the need. I mentioned the Minnesota aspect because Minnesota is full of PFAS in a lot of their drinking water systems, groundwater systems, where their aquifers were contaminated and considerable cost, and regionalization is a real thing happening in a lot of communities. So if I had to pick a number right now, I think a full-scale PFAS treatment facility at our treatment plant would probably run in the $100 million. But really the good news is the Lake Manatee, our source water is very good. There's not a lot of industrial development that would contaminate that water supply, which is one reason why out of a $10 billion settlement, Manatee County is not going to get, I'm optimistic it'll be a substantial amount on paper, but in order to meet that $100 million cost, probably not. And should remember, your point of use device on a refrigerator, now we're equipped to remove PFAS. PFAS is everywhere from the carpets to your clothing. Really, the amount of PFAS that and that's why the federal standards have adjusted, is because the amount of PFAS that we ingest as humans is if you take the total, the amount that you would get from your drinking water supply is very low. Manatee County's PFAS levels are very low. The standard is, 4 parts per trillion is the standard. We're at about 0.75, so 0.75. So we're more than 75% below that threshold standard where we would have to look at a treatment system to be able to treat that. And Peace River is in the same boat as we are. We have good water supplies, not contaminated with PFAS, so we're in good shape. The likelihood in the next 10 years that the treatment technology for PFAS at the drinking water plant is relatively unlikely, but as we talk about our leachate and talk about our wastewater plants, there's a little bit more concern. Those class action lawsuits have not been completed yet.
Got it. Okay, well, I appreciate you answering that. I think when people see the fees increase, they want to know what else are they getting for their money. And so if we can, if one of the answers is certainly we're looking at enhancing drinking water quality, potentially filtering these contaminants out, it's an easier sell and people see where the money's going. But it doesn't sound like we have the levels of contamination that would be a concern.
That's correct. And, 3 buckets, there's the rehab, there's the improvement, which is, a higher level of treatment, and then there's expansion. So really 3 costs with any CIP project at the plants.
Yeah, just very quickly, in trying to get the accurate rates for east of the FDAB, how quickly can we do that so that we can ensure that the rest of the county doesn't end up paying for the infrastructure that's going to have to go in east of the FDAB? And then that'll be brought back before the board potentially for a new rate level for development east of the FDAB? Is that the process? I'm just trying to figure out logistically how we get there as expeditiously as possible.
Okay. So consultant kind of brought up the transmission costs, which might make it a little bit more level of effort. But I can commit 3 months. If it's not going to be 3 months, I would let you all know that we wouldn't. And this is a work session, so there's no board action. So we're taking comments on the FIF study. So these comments are very helpful because we can incorporate them into a final version. So I think 3 months is a very reasonable timeline. And if it is not, if our consultants want to slash my tires at the end of the meeting, I'll let you know.
Yeah, I had one quick question, but now it's a question and a comment. I'll just remind everyone up here, as unfortunate as it is, we are actively being sued on impact fees, which are substantially similar and virtually identical to facility investment fees. So you could have a report done this weekend, but at this point, there's not a whole lot we can do with it, honestly.
Solid point.
So, let's make sure we get a good report in, because just having a really fast report sitting on a shelf while we work through lawsuits and Senate Bill 180 is not practical. I'd rather have a proper report that's legally defensible, because we unfortunately have the time to get that. That was it. That one was a comment. My question, which goes more towards you, Pat. Earlier on, I was trying to wait for you to finish the presentation. We were talking about the new basin, the new reservoir, whatever you called it, over the treatment plant, the $200 million to expand capacity. I know we've previously talked about whether or not you can dredge it down or make more capacity there. We also talked about the extra $3 million in one place and $5 million in another place. are we going to, are we going to have the ability from a regulation standpoint to treat and use that water? And two, are we considering and readjusting our anticipation of self-providing water versus outside sources like Peace River in exchange fees? Like Peace River is super expensive water, and Peace River even more so is super expensive infrastructure to get the water here, which we do not currently have. We pay to be a member of Peace River. We have since '81, I think, somewhere around there. So we pay every year. We're on the board. We have a say, but we do not have any capacity allocated to us at Peace River's facility in any of their reservoirs. And we do not have the proper infrastructure for pipes to bring that water here. So there's always this question of how long is that going to take? How much is that going to cost? And at what point in time do we have to pull the trigger and start the process of funding that infrastructure for the inevitable purchase of water from Peace River? My argument has always, and I believe, and I don't want to speak on his behalf, I believe Commissioner Bearden's argument has been the same as mine, because we both sat on this board. The more we can keep this water internally, the longer, the better off we're all going to be. So I think there's something that needs to be considered, because Commissioner Sadiq made the reference to the PFAS and showing people what you're getting for things. These facility investment fees, being able to fund additional capacity and showing a meaningful extension of the timeline that we can continue to self-provide water, has a very tangible and real ability to look at, here's why your water rates are so low and why we're able to keep them so low for so long, and here's what your water rates would trigger if we have to go to Peace River. So my question to you is, are we running that analysis? As we're looking at $1.6 billion of expansion costs and other costs, are we looking at, this is going to take us from 2035, 37, all the way out to 2057, and we're buying 2 more decades of cheaper water rates for people, and those water rates will in turn be cheaper water rates for home buyers, future home buyers. So while someone could argue passing FIF fees through and it's going to make homes more expensive, well, if you're paying cheaper water for 20 years on that new home you bought at a slightly higher price, then you could make the economic argument that you'd rather pay the $10,000 in facility investment fees today and have cheaper water rates for decades. Are we running this analysis?
Chairman Cruz, yes. So that's all part of our water use permit. So through the state, we're allocated so much water capacity. We hit a certain threshold. If we hit the point we're out of water, we give kind of a 7-year warning to Peace River, a commitment to them to hook up. So at the board's direction, as part of our legislative priorities, we listed kind of ASR, aquifer storage and recovery treatment standards through the state. We're looking at a large ASR as a potential water source, kind of saving some of the water out of Lake Manatee during the rainy season, generating a ASR well field at the water treatment plant that we would be able to recover during the dry season. And if that, there's some hurdles we're going through, and we're working that through as part of our water use permit. If that goes forward, then I think our capacity will, I don't know the date, but we'll bring that forward, because we have to bring forward that Peace River report for board approval in December or January here. So we'll bring that forward, and we'll be able to kind of outline kind of what we're thinking and where we're at in that process.
Okay, because I'm going to say, because sometimes like you can increase capacity, it doesn't mean you can treat that water. Yeah. And so having excess capacity doesn't do you any good if you can't treat it and sell it and use it. The ASR stuff is different. Peace River is dealing with the same thing. We have advocates for them because it's very cost prohibitive to do that system right now, because you have to treat the water twice. And to your point, the treatment cost of water has gone up dramatically. So having to treat it before you put it down, then treat it when it comes back up because of arsenic is silly and pointless. So we are running this analysis, because I think that's important. I think if we can find a way, it may be expensive to do, but I bet you if you run a financial analysis of the cost of creating that capacity versus the extension of how long we can continue serving our customers and our citizens and our residents with our own water supply, I think it would net positive to all ratepayers in the long run.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay, Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple quick questions. Much like impact fees, we have impact fee districts. So we looked at an FIF district type setup to where, you know, like, my district doesn't have the luxury of all the new construction that's going on out. out east.
Luxury.
And my district has aging infrastructure, pipes or whatever's going on in there. So have we looked at setting up different FIF districts, or like we do with impact fees, or is that something that's not capable to do because we spread the wealth, or spread the, not the wealth, the cost throughout the county?
We have not, as far as I'm aware. So the 2005, when the FIF fees kind of first started, in between them and now, we've done a kind of a one-size-fits-all.
Okay. Because sort of like for Commissioner Ballard, Commissioner Sadiq in my district, we don't have a massive bunch of new construction going on. So my concern again is the aging infrastructure in these districts that, you know, for like a Bayshore Gardens, we're consistently in there fixing aging infrastructure. So how do we delineate between the new construction is getting brand new piping, all brand new everything, lift stations and that, to where the aging infrastructure is, you know, we're constantly fixing lift stations in my district, constantly relining pipes, constantly doing things like that. So I'm trying to understand how we're gonna, you know, we're hitting everybody with the same fee, but I'm not picking on any districts, but I mean, it's, you know, how do we balance that out?
So to clarify, this is just new connections. So the rehab is paid through rates. So your water and sewer
Okay.
rates are what fund those projects. So if there's an undeveloped parcel in your district that's getting developed, that would, an FIF fee may apply.
Okay.
If there's an expansion, so say it's a single-family home and it's going to turn into a sixplex apartment unit and their meter size gets larger, then there might be an FIF fee. So some redevelopment, if the water demand, if the levels of service increase for that property, then that would apply. But rehabbing or repairing a lift station, running new water and sewer lines in because they've reached end of life, maintaining that level of service, there's no FIF fee.
All right, so that fee's paid for the standard utility rate. The reason I'm asking is in part of the cover letter, it states that support, repair, replace, and rehabilitation of aging infrastructure. So that's the reason I kind of asked that question. So basically, the FIF, will, if I have a new apartment complex going in, they will get hit with that FIF, but the aging infrastructure, say in a Bayshore Gardens area, is paid strictly through the utilities fees.
Correct. And we have a rate aspect of this presentation, so that's why that's mentioned in there. So we'll
Okay.
talk about rates next. The
All right, thank you very
consultant will
much.
talk about rates.
Anything else on facility investment fees? Okay, well, we're supposed to take a short break at 10:30 anyway, and if we're switching gears to a whole new presentation, there's no sense in doing it for 7 minutes. So let's just take a 10-minute recess till 10:33. We'll come back and we'll talk about the water rate side of it. All right. All right, we are back to our work session on Part B of Item 1 about water rates. Go ahead.
So, just a little bit of background for the monthly user rate study. The county last performed a rate study in 2023, and prior to that, rates had not been adjusted for the prior 5 years, back to 2018. Some of the key rate drivers from the last study were inflation and capital needs of the system, and then down below you can see the adoption of the multi-year rate adjustment and the price, the annual price index. So, as mentioned before, the county has about 84 million gallons a day permitted water treatment capacity, and about three county-owned wastewater treatment plants combining for about 33.5 MGD of capacity. Currently, the county has over 4,200 miles of line, which from Manatee County, if you were to drive by car, that would take you all the way to Juneau, Alaska. So there's a lot of infrastructure built in the county. To be precise, there's about $1.6 billion that's been invested in original cost. In today's dollars, that equates to about $3.2 billion, so about 100% higher than what the original cost is. The chart on the right there, you can see that massive difference. You can see about $1.3 billion in today's dollars of infrastructure is 30 years or older. So to some of your points, there is some aging infrastructure within your system that would need to be replaced. And that's, a lot of that infrastructure investment has been kind of sorry, lost my train of thought. Yeah, it's 3.2 billion. But it's matched the growth within the county as well. So the green line there shows the growth in the county, and you can kind of see since 2019 the drastic increase in the population within the county. Again, for the prior rate study that was done in 2023, the total 5-year CIP was around $1.3 billion. It anticipated about the need of $700 million in new debt. The current rate study for this year is looking at a CIP around $1.7 billion and needs an additional $1 billion in new debt to help fund those projects. So you can see over the last 2 years, that's an increase of $400 million in capital, along with an additional $300 million in debt service to help pay for those capital projects. For the financial plan, just a little bit of detail on the funding for the capital. Like I mentioned before, about $1.7 billion or about $345 million a year in capital reinvestment. To fund that, the county, we projected about 60% debt funding over 5 different debt issuances over the next 5 years to help fund that capital. The annual debt service payments essentially increased from about $32 million to right about $105 million in total annual debt service by the end of the forecast period. The other funding sources are user fees, which fund about 29% or half a billion dollars, and then 12% is FIF funded for about $200 million. So for the rate plan, we have a 5-year rate plan to support debt issuances and capital plan and the capital plan. Off to the right, you can see the revenue requirements. So the bright blue bar is your operating expenditures. That dark green bar that is on top of that is your debt service. So you can see that growing quite a bit by the end of the forecast period. And the green on top of the dark green, the lighter green, is the PAYGO or user fee funded capital. The average bill, the adjustments that we're asking for is 8.75% a year, which is in line with and actually slightly lower than what was identified in the previous study. We had identified 9.75% in the outer year. So we're at 8.75%, which is an average bill increase of about $10 a month over the 5-year forecast period. For our ending cash balances, you can kind of see to the chart to the right is our ending cash for each fiscal year. Our cash declines due to the massive capital plan that we're funding through debt and through our own cash. We maintain a reasonable reserve given how large our CIP is, and we exceed, the county policy of 20% or approximately 75 days. We actually meet 120 days of O&M of operating reserves. We do not meet, though, the AAA rated Moody's of 250 days of unrestricted cash, which would be about $100 million in your operating reserve. Bless you.
Is there a reason for that, the last point? Is that just policy or was it
What, for
strategic?
not meeting the cash reserve?
For the Moody's rating, at least. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so part of the plan is that as we look at these rate adjustments and the drastic need of the capital, we have to weigh our options in terms of rate adjustments and how we can fund the capital, and then what financial metrics we can somewhat lower in order to, keep that rate adjustment lower than what's necessary. To fully fund the capital and to meet the metrics for a AAA rated utility at, 250 days of cash or higher, you would need, more of a 11 to 12% adjustment annually to do that. So we're trying to be more conservative and ask for a lesser amount than what would fully be needed. And by doing that, we're slightly degrading our financial metrics.
Okay, so that's so we can make the debt service payments, future capital. Okay, that's all I had.
Yeah, and so the next point is the debt service coverage. So our debt coverage is calculated by our net revenues divided by our annual debt service. It's an indicator of the ability to repay your debt service obligations. You can see that we meet the minimum coverage requirements for senior debt coverage. But again, we fall below that AAA rated Moody's of the 2.0 coverage. And again, we're doing that because, in order to meet that coverage, we would need to, adjust rates further. But we are keeping our coverage at a 1.3, a 1.4%, or 1.4 times coverage, which is enough for investment grade and would allow us to continue to issue bonds and pay for the capital plan. Here we have a rate comparison of the, neighboring utilities and counties and cities. Currently, the existing rates are 99. This is a 6,000 gallon comparison for a residential customer. We're currently at $99.26. With an 8.75% adjustment, we would be at around $108.93, which is still far below the survey average of about $128. For our key findings and recommendations, we're proposing the 4-year phase-in of the FIFs, which is capped at the 50% increase. And then for the monthly user rates, we're seeing that significant capital funding needs. We're looking to make sure that we budget for the total projects in the year, the appropriation. And then we're proposing rate adjustments that fully fund the operating and the capital needs of the system. It keeps our rate comparable to the adjustments that were identified in the prior study, and our debt service coverage compliance is met. But again, we're acknowledging that there's a downgrade risk due to the lower debt service coverage. And then we'll obviously be back to update you all once we can get the final FY25 financials available. And we recommend that you continue to annually update the financial plan. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions, comments? Commissioner Ballard.
So the rate increase that we're looking at is 8.75, and that's over 5 years? Or is that
It's 8.75 a year for 5 years.
a year for 5 years?
Yes.
And so total increase, we're looking at, in everybody's bill, we're looking at a $10 a year.
$10 a month.
$10.
So it'd be $120 a year.
So $120 a year
Yes.
each year.
Well, on average, yes.
That's significant. So by 2030, our average user is going to be paying $50 a month more for water.
Correct. For water and wastewater.
And sorry, the chart that you have, not that, yeah, this one, this
This one?
comparative.
Yep.
The survey average is 127.93.
Right.
Do we have that calculated out for the years going forward? So it looks like this is next year's, but do we have that calculated out for 2029 or 2030?
No, but conservatively. Did you want to say? Okay, I was gonna say conservatively, I mean, that is for FY '26 rates. You could say that would increase anywhere between 3 to 5%, on the low end. Most utilities that we're seeing across the state are raising, high single digits in terms of their rate adjustments. So you would figure in, another 3 to 4 years, that would jump up to well above the $150 mark. So again, you would be most likely either in line or below that survey average.
So you believe that even by 2030, we would still be below average on our rates, is that correct?
Yes. Let me just do a quick math here.
Just while he does the math, for the record, my name is Terry Bovary with Reptalis and was the project director for the engagement. I'd just like to mention that the Bureau of Labor Statistics provides a inflation factor as a subcomponent to the CPI for water and trash. It's averaged around 5% per year over the last 20 years. So we won't necessarily know specifically unless there's been a published rate study, adopted increases here, and sometimes we do look at that. We don't have that prepared for you today. We could attempt to do that and reconstruct a forward-looking projection of some of these other comparisons. But if we were to just simply assume, 5% per year to continue on average, that would be roughly 25% without compounding over the next 5 years. And at 10%, that would be $12. So yes, you'd be at approximately $155 at the survey average if everyone were to continue with that same inflationary trend that we've been seeing over the last. Yet, of course, historical performance is no indication of future results, so for that disclosure.
Okay, and over the past, let's say, 5 to 10 years, what have our increases looked like?
You want to go back to your historical?
Like, have we been holding these rates artificially low for a really long time? And I
No.
mean, obviously, I know, I see that the capital needs are huge, and I realize that, but.
There was a period of time prior to the 23 study where the rates really hadn't moved too much, and that study resulted in some rate recommendations, and the board adopted significant rate adjustments for 2 years at 9.75% to address at the then time what we were observing as very significant run-up in inflation to the cost of service, along with that significant capital need of the system, which has only increased over the last several years when we were brought back to review and update that projection. So I would say that the board has taken action to raise rates and keep pace with everything. The issue that we find right now, and I think Mr. Shea pointed out earlier, that you've had significant increase in inflation to the capital projects. So projects in the last study, even in 2023, there might have been a $100 million project. Today, it's closer to $200 million, and we're factoring this now and updating the projections. So I wouldn't say it's any inaction from the board or even from staff. It's just the reality of higher inflation to the cost of service.
Yeah, I mean, I represent a lot of, kind of financially constrained constituents, and $50 a month extra on the water bill is obviously going to be, it's going to be a big lift for people. So I'm obviously very concerned about that, but I also understand the capital needs, and I also understand that you're holding rates a little bit below what the study projects. So thank you for answering those questions.
And I would just add that that's why we're recommending looking at it every year, because to the extent that the timing of these capital needs get lagged from what the plan is, because from a budgetary perspective, we always have to have the funding before we can appropriate and move forward with the project. But to the extent that any of this were to delay outside of the timeline, we'd recommend a review, which is why, with the size of the need and the size of the magnitude of the increases we're talking about, reviewing it annually becomes very important.
You good?
That's all for now,
right.
thank you.
I got Commissioner Siddiq and then Commissioner Beard.
Couple of quick comments, because I don't think anyone's going to go back to our CIP and find the page. I think it was page 15 out of 973 for FY26 CIP, but I thought it was kind of interesting. So going into the next couple of fiscal years, we're looking at the two major expenses or use of funds are wastewater, which is number one, potable water two. We look at the amount of debt service we're paying for the next 2 fiscal years. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, for utilities, it's $436 million for FY27, $500 million for 28. That's a lot of debt service. I guess the good news in all that is when I look at those two categories for potable water and wastewater, I'm excluding the others. We have at least 261 active projects throughout the county. Greatest concentration is in 2, 3, and 4, which is good. That's where the aging infrastructure is, and quite a few in District 1. I guess the only thing I don't really see here on the list of projects, well, actually, one other point. Just for the public, let's also separate City of Bradenton, City of Palmetto projects from county. Those are not the same. But this is, how do we stack when it comes to the amount of, I'm gonna rephrase that, how do we compare when it comes to the type of potable water, wastewater infrastructure improvements we're making relative to other counties with aging infrastructure? Like, are we on the mark when it comes to making the appropriate investments, or are we, that's question one. I guess part of that is, are we deficient in other areas? So I see a lot of examples where we're making improvements to some reclaimed water lines, to the various water treatment facilities. Not a whole lot of I&I though, which is, gets a lot of headlines. So just to rephrase, can you just explain a little bit, how do we compare with other municipalities with investments in potable water and wastewater? And then where can we, why don't I see a lot of I&I projects here?
So I'll attack the two projects in the two areas you mentioned, and then I'll let Terry address kind of how we compare to others. So on the reclaim system, we have two ways to handle treated water when we're done with it. So we can use our injection well system, or we can reclaim and reuse it. So that reclaim system, the purple pipe system, is that reclaim. So that is an expansive system. It's becoming at one point, our reclaim water was a waste product that we were trying to get rid of. People didn't want it. We were begging people to take it. Now it's really become a valuable asset that people want. And because of that, the system needs to be constantly reevaluated and invested in. On the I&I, so one of the cost-saving initiatives that the board has adopted is the smart metering program, the AMI project that's ongoing. Part of that is a leak detection service, and as part of that, they're looking everywhere for leaks out in the system. So we don't have a specific large I&I project spelled out, because we do that as part of our operating budget every year. So we allocate in the collection system portion of our budget, we are allocating funding to that. So that is just a standard operation and maintenance program. We invest so much in it a year to make sure that works. And that, it's a great point to bring up from a cost-saving standpoint, because treating groundwater that's entering your sewer system has to be pumped, and then it has to be treated, and so you lost treatment capacity as part of it. So it's a very important project that the county is wisely invested in over the past several decades. And then on the regional comparisons.
Yeah, and I would say that there are a few variables that dictate the capital needs for any utility out there. Obviously, where are you at in your asset life cycle? So when you originally constructed the infrastructure, if it was timed around when the growth occurred in your community. So for example, I live in Central Florida, and we had significant growth in the late 80s and past then. So utilities that would have invested in water and wastewater treatment facilities around that time would be at that point in time today where they would have had to make significant investments back into those facilities, in addition to any regulatory-driven reinvestments that they would have had. The piping infrastructure can tend to have an asset life that extends beyond that 30 to 40-year horizon, depending on the type of material and all that. So what I would just say, just generally speaking, is that it's going to vary by community based on when they've invested in that infrastructure. But all utilities across Florida and the U.S. have significant capital reinvestment. American Society of Civil Engineers has identified hundreds of millions of dollars of reinvestment, trillions of dollars of reinvestment on the water side too. I think I don't know the specific numbers, but could get back to you. But it's a R&R on the water and sewer infrastructure. Water and utility is very capital intensive business, so many utilities have had to identify that R&R. Outside of the regulatory, the other thing that affects the CIP, as you know, is growth. So when we have to expand our facilities, we're buying into a new system at the then market cost. So if we have an existing system that bought in at a older cost of investment, and now we're expanding in this newer cost of investment, like the chairman mentioned kind of earlier when we were discussing the FDAB, it's that these costs end up being higher because it's at the current market rate. When you go to replace those assets, it's also going to be at the current market rate. So over the long run, the unit cost should be the same if the treatment processes are the same, but these are just some of the background. So I would say that, the county here is very comparable to many utilities out there dealing with R&R, dealing with the regulations, some of which have not fully hit. You mentioned PFAS earlier, as well as dealing with the growth and the growth pockets within the state.
Commissioner Beard.
Thank you. All right. So looking at this increase, what are the specific factors that went from 1.3 billion to 1.7 in just 2 years, and how much of that would you say was due to inflation versus new scope additions or deferred maintenance?
So going back, I'm going to go all the way back to the number of projects. I would say a very strong percentage is the inflation factor. Going back to that, right there, that slide. The average cost for a project going from $2.2 million to $8.8 million in a relatively short time frame really is added to it. Deferred maintenance is always an issue. We do everything we can to extend the life of the assets that our customers have invested in. So we want to right time any replacement or any project that we do to the best of our ability. The emergency maintenance, emergency replacement is the most expensive replacement. So trying to phase things out and fit that timeline. So Terry mentioned the Association of ASCE, the Civil Engineering Group, assets that the county would purchase that are part of the utility system. Some have a 20-year lifespan, some have a 30-year, some have 50 years plus. And so making sure our CIP and our asset management plan all are in a line so we can best use the public dollars to do the right projects at the right time. I don't know if that hit the mark for you, Commissioner Beard.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. It's just it's been very dramatic within that. So that's why I was just kind of curious on how much of that was inflation. Given the projected $1 billion in the new debt, how's that going to impact our long-term ratepayer obligations and intergenerational equity for our future residents paying for the current projects today?
So I'll let our rate consultant talk a little bit. I will
Okay.
just kind of mention that, you know, in the utility world, debt financing is sometimes a positive funding strategy because the Shea family moved here in early 2024. I can now pay for the infrastructure that I'm going to use over the next 20 years or so through my rates. So I'm currently benefiting from the investments through rates that people that lived here before me, I can now invest in the assets that I will use, and then the people that come after me will do the same. But I'll turn over kind of the debt strategy to Rev Tillis and maybe our CFO.
All right.
Yeah, I would concur with that statement, that basically using debt for capital investment that have very long lives, averaging, 30 years or so, makes a lot of sense, particularly if you're dealing with significant R&R, because if you were to take a strategy of trying to fund all of these improvements from rates without debt, the rate increases would be substantially greater. So it's much more equitable to fund these costs from debt and ensure that both the ratepayers of today that are benefiting from this infrastructure and those I'll be connecting in the future are going to be contributing to that infrastructure.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay. And regarding what assumptions underlie the 8.75% annual rate increase, how sensitive are these projections to inflation or population growth and construction cost?
So we within the financial plans, we had assumed about a 1% growth rate per year on a recurring basis. We assumed inflation in that 4 to 5% range per year, 4.75 to be specific. And the plan recognized the debt service due to the capital funding plan needs. So the 8.75% accounts for everything. One of the things that my colleague, Mr. Tuma, pointed out, though, is that with these rate increases, while our fiscal policy minimum targets are being met, we are seeing that the coverage ratios and some of the other metrics that lend to a AAA or a AA rated utility are not being met and are declining. And so that could lend itself to higher borrowing costs in the future, but we're trying to walk a fine line and balance competing objectives. On the one hand, we need to raise rates and we want to have the best credit rating that we can have, but we also want to minimize rate impacts to customers. And this is something maybe we could try to address over perhaps a longer period of time, but this is where we're trying to seek some direction from the board.
Got it. And if inflation or let's just say borrowing costs happen to rise above the projections, do we have a plan, or how will we as a county avoid the structural deficits or additional rate shocks in future years? Do we have a strategy for that, or?
So Commissioner Bearden, we would bring, our rates are set by resolution, the FIF fees are by ordinance. So as Rev Tillis recommended, we'll do a revenue sufficiency study annually and ongoing. If at some point things either to the positive or negative go a different way, we would keep the board updated. And if the board were to adopt a rate schedule in December with a 5-year rate schedule, and in 2027 the sitting board wanted to change that rate schedule, we would bring forward a new resolution that would address that. So decisions made in December of 2025 are not necessarily going to be the same decisions and same resolutions that would be adopted at a later time. So it's all within the board's authority to make adjustments to the rates based upon current conditions.
Well, have we looked at any alternative funding strategies to reduce the reliance on debt issuance?
Well, maybe you could clarify what you may be thinking about in terms of alternative financing? Do you mean different types of debt structures?
Are there like maybe some state revolving funds that we might be able to utilize or anything like that?
Sure.
You know, are we looking at any type of public-private partnerships, cost sharing, anything? I mean, to be able to reduce any of that.
Yes, so as we bring projects forward and those that work on retaining funds for projects, through our fiscal agencies, we scour and look for what programs are out there. Federal government has a state revolving fund program that offers some favorable interest programs, WIFIA, Water Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Authority. Also a federal program through the US EPA offers some funding strategies. As this board has been authorized, we've done some, cash on hand type programs. And then just structuring the expenses on these projects to more in line with kind of that cash balance. So this is kind of a 10,000-foot view of what the financial system would look like when we get to actually considering bonding and different financing mechanisms. Then those decisions will be a lot more in depth, and we'll have a lot more information ahead of us. Some utilities are doing 50-year bonds for some of these larger projects. Some SRF funds, will rate down the interest rate a percentage or two, but there's usually some other strings attached. So everything needs to be considered and kind of run through the process.
Got it. And do we know what our county's maximum sustainable debt ratio is before triggering credit concerns or ratepayer affordability thresholds? Do we know what that is? Maybe Sheila can answer that.
So there is a requirement of meeting the debt service coverage. The basic of it, one is at 1.2, 2 times of what our normal revenues are. And I also wanted to, I'm sorry, Sheila McLean, CFO. I wanted to point out that we have right now, as we speak, as we are evaluating the rates, we are also evaluating the funding strategies with our financial advisor. I mean, it is kind of like a multitude of experience that we are bringing to the table to evaluate what are the best strategies, not only timing-wise, but also taking advantage of our ratings that we have currently to bring in lower interest rates and things like that. And also the department is also evaluating, phasing out the projects so that we are not committing everything in the very first years of the 5-year cycle, and at the same time meeting the expansion strategies and the needs of the system as well. We have 5 of our underwriters in our pool that are also evaluating looking at the market and seeing how they can help us with the different strategies of financing.
Okay. So I know that Commissioner Ballard, she made a really good point. Do we know the percentage of customers that will experience bill stress or hardship under that 8.75% annual increase, especially for the low and fixed income households? Do we look at metrics such as that?
We've looked at that, Terry Bovary again with Reptiles. We've looked at that, I think, in the past. When we did the 23 study, we had a slide trying to assess at a very, very high level about affordability. It's a very, it's a problem that's specific to the circumstances of the individual. For example, you could have some individuals that may have a short-term hardship that create difficulty with paying their monthly expenses, or they could have more of a chronic recurring issue. So you have a range of folks that have different affordability issues. Inflation's been high for folks that have been on fixed income. We haven't updated those calculations in some time, but could look at them again. Last time we looked at them, what we had identified is that those that had more of the affordability challenges were in the incorporated municipality within the county, if I recall correctly from the 23 study, and that while there were some residents obviously within the unincorporated that were having issues, you know, as we may define by looking at what is the bill as a percent of the monthly income for that individual. And specifically, we were looking at those within the reported income groups at the 20th percentile. So the lowest 20% of income generating households within the community. We found that the bills were still generally within range of affordability with the rate increases. But, you know, again, it's been some time since we've really looked at it and could dig up those calculations. The EPA and some of the, you know, water and sewer industry trade groups out there have been developing better frameworks for attempting to assess that for members of the public and elected officials. So we could also review that and come back with a desktop evaluation and provide better findings there.
Okay, so with the utilities averaging around $128 a month, which is, you guys are telling us, remains still below the average, is that a sustainable benchmark? Or does it risk underfunding long-term system renewals?
I think what we have to understand is that water and wastewater service is an incredibly essential service for public health, safety, welfare, and that folks are going to prioritize this expenditure ahead of other expenditures. So what ends up happening when we raise the rates, we don't want to raise the rates, but first what we try to do, and most utilities that I work with, including here at the county, attempts to implement efficiencies and be as cost effective as it may be. Then once that's addressed, we look at our needs and then we have to pass those on because again, we're an enterprise fund. We don't receive any funding from taxes or the general fund. We have to operate like a business and set our rates to pass through the cost of service. So I think that what happens in the industry, what I've seen in the industry is, you know, your question about sustainability is a very complex one because it really means, you know, how is that going to impact individual ratepayers in terms of their behaviors around their discretionary spending and how much money that they're spending on these other things because they're still going to have to pay for this no matter what. When you have your water shut off, you're quickly reacting to try to get it turned back on again. So not a very direct answer to your question, but I think it's a complicated one.
No, I get that. So maybe Pat be able to answer this. How many people get shut off on a monthly basis, their services, based on them not being able to pay them?
I think right now, Commissioner Bearden, I think we're in about, my mind gets a little foggy on those that receive notice versus those that are shut off. I think currently, because of some past issues related to COVID and some other issues, I think we're currently sitting with like 4,000 that are currently off. But that's the aggregate, so that's total over the last 2 years.
Got it. Okay. And I could see that increasing, I mean, especially if we're going to be implementing FIF fees across the county, possibility, right? Yeah, okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, I'll be quick. You had a chart up showing where we stood relative to everybody else, so it's a bar chart.
I like the snow on the trees in the display, though.
These are more statements than questions, but you're going backwards? Up. There. I just want to point out, again, these are more statements. Look, no one wants to increase water rates, and it's frustrating because we kick this down the road so often. I think I may have been the only one on the board, or maybe you guys had just come on, because I think people are waiting out elections. That's what happens. We hadn't increased water rates in forever. And years ago, we got like raced up here because we were like 5 seconds away from like defaulting on the debt coverage tests on our bonds if we didn't increase them. That's how low we allowed these rates to trend down as expenses went up, especially post-COVID. If you look at this, we're at the bottom of what people are actually paying right now. So any discussion of increased cost has to be taken in context of what's the actual cost if we don't increase them? Because if we have to go to Peace River, if I look at this chart, which I asked you, and I look to the far right, these really, really high bars over here, I see City of Northport, the second highest. They get their money, they're a Peace River Water Authority member, the only city that's a Peace River Water. I see Charlotte County, that's all Peace River Water. I see DeSoto County, I see Sarasota County. Those are the other members of Peace River. They're on the far right side of this chart. We're on the far left side because we do this ourselves, and we do this extremely cost effectively. But we are dealing with trash right now. And there was a whole big discussion of, do people want to pay a couple of dollars more and get water or get trash twice a week, or save a few bucks thinking we're doing somebody a benefit and only collect once a week? Now imagine this scenario if we start telling people you're only going to have water come out of your faucet 4 days a week. It's not physically possible. Utilities is an enterprise fund. Utilities isn't a revenue generating source. It's not a profit center. The intent of an enterprise fund is it exactly breaks even. It's sort of like our permit departments and other things here in the county. So it's unfortunate, but we are bearing the burden of additional cost of providing, as was stated, one of the most, if not the most essential thing a government needs to do for people is make sure water comes out of their faucet when they turn it on. And we don't dictate this. These aren't our chemicals. We try to be as efficient as we can from a manpower standpoint and so forth. That's why we have these people. I know people think we're reading their brainwaves or something, but that's why we put these the water readers in there. Because eventually, in the long run, that's going to save money, which is going to translate into a savings on water rates, because we don't have to send trucks around all over the place and manpower around to read meters. We're doing what we can, but we cannot default on our bonds, and we cannot renege on the promise to people to provide the capacity necessary to provide the water they need, or we're going to be on the right side of this. My fear is people inherently look to the short term at the expense of the long term. And in the short term, everyone wants to sit up here. 7 people want to sit up here and tell everyone, I'm going to send you a mailer in 4 years and tell you how I kept your water rates down. But 40 years from now, we're going to be at the far, far right side of this because we're getting money from Peace River because we can't afford the bonds to provide the capacity necessary to keep the water internally to stay on this left side. And any savings people receive today is going to be paid back twofold down the road when their rates dramatically increase. So I just want people to be aware that it's unfortunate that prices go up, but prices go up every place. I mean, that's just what's happening with inflation right now and has been happening with inflation. And we're no exception. Peace River is no exception. We need to keep our rates as low as possible, but we need to do it within the context of still being able to provide clean, safe water to everybody who wants it here in Manatee County. And we just need to make sure we're monitoring. I thought years ago we said, let's do 4.5%. And then I thought we were supposed to tee it to a calculation, so we didn't have to have this conversation again. That was my promise to me. This is the last time I had to have this conversation, was we were going to tie it to some metric of the greater of inflation or the CPI associated with the cost of doing it, and it was going to be behind the scenes, administrative, and we didn't have to have these conversations. It was just water was going to cost what water cost. No more, no less. But here we are, having this conversation again. So it's more of a statement. I just want people to realize this is enterprise. This isn't like, hey, let's get some more money here. And because it's an enterprise fund, the intent of it is we don't have other revenue sources. And Commissioner Bearden pointed out, are there other things? Sure, we can go ask for appropriations. We can go talk to the federal government, the state government. But this isn't like other aspects of our government. We can move stuff from parks to animal welfare. This pays for itself, and we have 2 sources we can get it from: the rates and the facility investment fees, but they cover different things. Just because you increase facility investment fees doesn't mean you can lower rates, other than the fact that if you don't collect, in theory, if you do not collect enough facility investment fees, then you have to still build that, in which case you'd have to bond. And if you have to bond, the debt service from that would come from rates. So they're not, it's not a 1-0 correlation of no correlation. Double negative. But that is the case. So if we could increase facility investment fees, in theory, we can keep water rates slightly lower by not having to bear the burden of the additional bonding costs associated with it. But that's for lack of a better term, drop in the bucket relative to what these rate increases are for, which is for the chemicals and for all of the other things that have increased dramatically for everybody in this entire country, and we're no exception. That's all. Tal, are you on the board again? Okay, Commissioner City.
So in line with that thinking, Commissioner Ron also brought this up when talking about how do we bill utility customers. One of the, I would like to see a system that is transparent, not necessarily automatic, but frequent when it comes to keeping up with the cost of the needs for our county. But I think inflation's not necessarily a great one, and I'm just cherry picking a few of your numbers. You mentioned chlorine went up 246%. Lift stations, the cost of those went up 67.5%. Copper pipes, somewhere between 133 and 151%. I don't know how automatically pegging the rate increases to, well, granted that was under FIF conversation, but I'm just using examples to show just how drastically some of these costs can go up. I don't know if inflation, pegging rate increases to inflation is the best number or metric. I don't know if necessarily charging a different fee to different types of users is good, but what's a way we can not necessarily come back every 5 years and review this, but what are other, my question is, what are some appropriate metrics that this board and future boards can use to evaluate what the appropriate rate increases should be? Then we can use that to inform whether they should be administrative or otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sadiq, so to Chairman Cruz's comment, 2025 rate increase was the specific CPI related to water and wastewater infrastructure. So we did that for 1 year. So partial compliance. So the last rate study in 2023 had a 5-year recommended rate study. The board at that time adopted the 2-year with the automatic renewal using a consumer price index. And so tying it the cost of clean water slide, the purpose of that was really to show that the cost to keep levels of service the same in water and wastewater service delivery is much more than what somebody might experience as far as inflation goes. It's just to really show that there has been really since COVID, project costs is the one that just jumps out at me. Just, a lift station that would have been $500,000 is now, $2 million. It's just like every time, you don't want to open the engineer's estimates when you start to do a project because you're just floored by it. So, one commodity price, cost of concrete, just the cost of rebar, all those things have been dramatic. So, kind of to take a step back, it was more just an illustration of, because the cost of a hamburger at the bar and grill you go to went up 10% in the last 2 years. It's not really analogous to what it costs to deliver water and wastewater services.
What are our peer utilities doing? I'm not saying necessarily we look at the cost of chlorine and peg the rate increase to that, but there has to be a better way to do this than let's just come back every 5 years. Or when the board feels like, granted, the last one was in 2023, it's not 5 years, but.
So I was very impressed with the way the resolution was written that tied to it to a water and wastewater specific CPI calculation. I think that would be something that, if the board directed, we would bring forward with any rate resolution to have the out years include that in there, because if that's the case, you kind of see our budgets, you see our rates a couple different ways. You see them during the budget process because the revenues that sustain the budget are assumed as part of that budget process. So during that process, the rate strategy is intuitively intertwined with that. So it does make it keeps it transparent, but makes it more easily trackable for residential, people watching their budgets. They can really kind of track what to expect in future years.
When I'm looking, I just did a quick Google, could be wrong, but the CPI increases between 23 to 24, for example, were, well, they fluctuate throughout the year, but they're less than the rate increases you're asking for. So like they were 3% roughly year over year. Yeah, general.
Yeah, I mean, I think just 2 points. One is that when we adopted the recommendations back in 2023, we had identified 9.75% for the next 5 years. But we didn't want to make that automatic, so the direction was to only adopt 2 years and then a price index thereafter. But we still had the need for the 9.75% anyways. At that time, we knew that. So adopting the 5% is actually less than what the last rate study identified. The idea is that once we get to the point, there were a lot of uncertainties again around the capital improvement plan at that then time even. So, and I think it's bearing out that we have even more needs identified now. So we've done this mid-year update, but it's really a choice to the policymakers, to you all, about how you want utility staff to bring back these rate recommendations and need for these rate recommendations. You can never perfectly codify within a rate resolution every eventuality that may occur. And so in some instances, we're going to have these black swan events like COVID, whatever it is. But generally speaking, those utilities that have this type of a price index and they've gotten to the point where they're break even, in other words, they're covering all of their costs, they have enough money for the future planned debt issuances. Once you get to that level and you continue to apply this index, very frequently you don't have to come back to make any additional edits to what the rate plan is.
Okay, that was gonna be my next question, my last one. So how accurately does the CPI increase track with real-world costs?
I think it does a pretty good job of it, because
Okay.
what we're talking about, just for everyone in the public's benefit, is the Water and Sewerage Maintenance Index. So this is a subcomponent to the CPI. And what the Bureau of Labor Statistics does is they look at the water and sewer bills across the U.S., and they look at what the change of that is on average using statistically significant sampling. So when we see what that percentage increase is year over year, while there are nuances regionally about cost increases to different utilities, a lot of the same cost inputs, like the need to do capital reinvestment, because a lot of utilities all had Clean Water Act regulations implemented at the same time. So a lot of wastewater utilities were all constructed around the same time to meet those in compliance with the EPA requirements. So I guess the point is that you're going to have regional nuances, but generally this broad index is a good proxy for the unit cost increases that most utilities are going to experience.
Commissioner Bearden, is your hand still raised or is it a new raise?
It's not raised at all.
Oh, sorry, that is Commissioner, they shifted up what the panels were on here. Commissioner
worries.
Feltz. Commissioner Feltz.
I'm sorry, having a little technical difficulty here. Can you hear me?
It's just all microphones then, huh?
Okay.
You're, go ahead.
Am I good?
You're good.
Okay, thank you. First off, two things. Commissioner Ballard, I very much appreciate that you've represented that ground floor cost to our strained communities at this time. I appreciate that. And also, Commissioner Cruz, a very good summary of our conditions that we have. I'm understanding our cost of living increases and all that. When we talked about cutoffs and things like that, understanding that a little bit of analysis there on some of those cutoffs are a majority being rental properties that we have an issue with out here, you know, because they the renters tend to be, you know, responsible for their own utilities. They move, they don't pay, and I'd like to see some analysis with that. Um, Again, in representing District 1, we have a, 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 a great deal of people out here who are perfectly willing to stay on their wells and sewers to avoid the burden on the county supplying our water and sewer. And I hope that that would be a factor um, in our future discussions, because this was a main issue since we moved our FDAB, and the 2.1.2.8 was basically the cost and our ability to do that without increasing the cost for every citizen in Manatee County. I appreciate also Commissioner Bearden suggesting that is there something we can do to offset this substantial of a rate increase? And I do understand with our budgeting, we're constantly told, you know, we can't take money from one thing for another, but from the ground level here, it is very difficult to explain to our citizens how we have to have a water rate increase, yet we have the money to build uh, 1,000 parks and recreation. And are we also looking, we've just increased our, not increased, but we've decreased our garbage systems services. We have the money to build parks. We're looking at a stormwater fee. So we're going to increase our water rates. We're going to have FIF fees. We're going to reduce our garbage services. And yet we're building gigantic parks. This is not making sense to your ordinary citizen. So I am also, I have dealt with multiple issues with when we change software systems for the utilities building. I would like to be assured that all of those things are taken care of before we even start working on our software billing at a different rate. I don't know if any of the others of you have handled as many citizen complaints and emails that we had during this transition to the new software. I don't even know if any of the rest of you are familiar with how many issues we had with that. I was assured in January when we were going to reinstate cutoff notices and stuff that everything was taken care of, but we still had issues. So my point being two things. One, we just have got to look at the bottom line for our citizens. As Commissioner Ballard said, a $50 increase in water billing is really going to be a hardship on some people. What can we do? Again, we're perfectly willing in half of my district, a large percentage of my district, to stay with our septic and with our wells, as long as you don't approve anything that is reducing that capacity. But I'm just not comfortable with delivering to our citizens. We've already still have issues with our garbage collection, which is perceived as a reduction in services. We're looking at FIF fees. We're looking at increasing water rates. We're looking at an accusation of $120 million in $112 million in overspending, which I think we are taking a bit of note of that. And I just would encourage our board to look at places that we could reduce our expenses for things that are non-essential.
as stated, providing clean water and sewage systems is a responsibility of the government. It is an essential purpose of the government at this point. There are many non-essential things that I know it's a different bucket. I know there's reasons for these things, but I'm just not comfortable constantly asking our citizens to keep paying more when they are willing to go without some of the other peripheries to get those basics provided to them. And I hope we keep that in mind as we evaluate this program. I also want to be very assured that whatever we have to do to put these new rates into the system, that we ensure that our methodologies and our auditing of whether that system can handle something like this based on where we were at, which, just to familiarize you with, that is when we did a software system change. There was no parallel billing system to make sure that the new software was charging correctly. We had an incredible amount of expense to that. I don't know what decision was made not to run parallel. I'm not familiar with all the intricacies of that, but I want to make sure that we're going to handle this a little bit better this time, rather than what happened with the software change before. So again, I would encourage our commissioners to look at the bottom line to our citizens. We've already decreased their garbage service. Where there are many things our citizens are willing to do without to reduce that perception of overspending. And I don't think that our timing is good at this point. I understand there's a lot of cost of living with everything, but there's got to be some way to offset this because our citizens are not going to be happy with this. And then we're going to come back with the stormwater fee too. Come on, guys. We've got to think harder at what we could do, because the bottom line to our citizens is that a perception in a lack of services, a lack of focus on the essentials, and the bottom line is that that's who's going to make determinations as far as our effectiveness. Thank you.
It's my job, all right. Okay, so just to clarify, there's a certain threshold to, there's a certain threshold for water utilization. I think it's 100,000 gallons. Again, I was just checking that online, could be wrong. But that much utilization by farmers, by your mining companies, that's all through SwiftMud, correct? That's not a water use permit coming from us. You're not using county water. I mean, you're using the aquifer, but.
Correct.
Okay, and the question, so wells are also, as I understand it, regulated very tightly by SwiftMud. When I talk to the Farm Bureau, virtually every farmer likes to talk to me about that too. So that's correct, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so we're not paying for, there's no direct, we're not charging people for that, okay. The other thing was, fine, I mean, the general conversation around waste, I mean, that just doesn't even include utilities. That was a call out to public safety. So anything even utilities related can ostensibly be called, that's not a question, I'm just making a point. But this whole, since Doge is referenced, I'll just say that waste doesn't even include, is ostensibly including utilities. And it's ironic because infrastructure is a core part of our role here. But I remember distinctly that public safety was the specific metric, was a specific category used in that talking point, but that didn't include infrastructure utility. So I'd be, bringing this back around, I'd be very careful when it comes to that definition of waste and this conversation around charging, about rate increases, FIF increases, because that is just not talking about utilities and infrastructure, firstly, unless, I mean, I haven't heard that explicitly called out. And every county is different. You look at Lake, they don't have a central utility. So for them, that doesn't even apply. They don't have that Lake County, a central utility like us. But for Manatee County, it's different. Just pointing out one example. But yeah, I just want to clarify that for the public, that large water utilization is typically done, it's actually done through SwiftMud. It's, residents are not, West County are not paying for the water utilization for, of someone of that level or wherever you are in the county. And that there's a general conversation being had certainly around what's waste, not, but this is not that. I mean, you either invest in the improvements you make, or you get put under consent decrees, which mandate very expensive upgrades. I mean, look at Miami-Dade County. Now they have to create these very intricate and expensive systems for processes and policies to implement septic to sewer conversions and all these other improvements. So I just want to clarify that for the public. Things can get very expensive when you're federally mandated to do them under any administration if we don't address some of these needs sooner. So just want to make the point there. Thank you.
All right. No one else on the board? Did we cut you off in the middle, or were you at the end on the kind of Q&A section of this?
Yeah, we're finished.
You're done. All right.
Yeah, just one closing comment, just want to, show you why we brought both items together, because they are interrelated. The funding need is there. It's essential service. It's an enterprise fund, so it is not in the DOGE $112 million discussion. This is a separate entity. Actually, a portion of your utility bills, payment in lieu of taxes, goes to fund some of the activities, fund some of your work as well. So if a lift station needs a new roof, your rates pay for it. It's not a property management. If we need new trees at a lift station, it's paid for through the utility accounts.
So hypothetically, if I did not build a pickleball court, how much of that savings would be able to offset my water rates?
Is it covered and lighted?
How much?
Zero.
Zero. Because there is no cost savings of parks. There's no cost savings for Doge. There's no pulling a deputy off the line for Sheriff Wells. None of this has any impact on the discussion we've had today.
Correct.
Any belt tightening we have relative to employee count in this building, or parks being built, or boat ramps being constructed, have no effect whatsoever on the water rates. The only way we can save money on water rates is through efficiencies in one department, and that's utilities department.
Correct.
And you, as far as I'm aware, I may be wrong, I'm only here 5 years, you have not built any parks?
Have not.
No, okay. Just want to clarify that. Thank you. Commissioner Ballard.
And just to get a little bit more clarification, Sheila, is there any mechanism by which we could pull money from other areas of the county, i.e. our property tax dollars, into utilities to pay for their improvements and needs to offset cost? I think that's getting at Commissioner Felt's comments.
Can you? Yes. Could you? It's not a recommendation by us, because bringing monies from the general fund infers that the utility system doesn't have the liquidity or capacity to meet its own needs. And as an enterprise fund, it should. All the rates should pay for the needs of the system and the rates of the FIS for growth.
And I will point out, water rates are, because people are talking about wanting to lower property taxes, and they keep pointing to the fact all these people are more than willing to switch it for a sales tax, because people apparently love consumption tax unless it has to do with parking. And water rates are effectively a consumption tax, for lack of a better term. We don't use your property taxes on it. you're not getting taxed, you're effectively paying for the consumption of the water you're utilizing. The more you use, the more you pay, the less you use, the less you pay. That's how consumption taxes work. It's effectively regressive in nature, but that's what we have. So all these people who say they'd rather have sales taxes and fees rather than property taxes, this is what this looks like, is you have to pay to keep it operational, and it's an essential service, so we just have to provide water to everyone at whatever cost it is to provide it, and our source of revenue associated with offsetting those expenses are your water rates. Is there anything else? Any final comments? Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I will open this up for public comment associated with facility investment fees and water rates, but I see nobody in the room, and there's nobody on the phone. So I will close public comment. Charlie, do you have anything on day 2 of our 3-day session here? No, sir. Okay. Pam? No, sir. Commissioner Ballard? No. Commissioner Ron? No, sir. Commissioner Siddiq?
Just one last thing, when can we expect to see that report on the utilities for east of the FDAB? We didn't really walk away with a general timeline, just an ask.
They said we're approximately, they said 3 months.
3 months, okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Feltz, do you have anything?
No, thank you, I'm good.
Commissioner Bearden, you have anything?
No.
Commissioner McCann, you have anything? No. All right. It's okay. With that, we are adjourned.